Hello and welcome to another episode of The Defenders on Sansad TV. And in this episode, we're looking at a subject which has made news right across the country for at least a week and will probably continue to be in the news for some time because of the lack of understanding, as I would say, on the merits and demerits of the scheme, what it had intended in terms of recruitment for the armed forces, and was the scheme about offering jobs or filling up the vacancies in the armed forces, which have only multiplied over the last 2 years because of a ban on recruitment due to the COVID. But also, it has long-term financial implications for the country and the nation's defense budget and the armed forces in particular, as well as it has implications on what sort of impact it could have on the capability of our military men and the armed forces and therefore national security. And to understand the subject, we have two military veterans who have done a lot of thinking about the subject and who have been commenting on it at various forums. And we have with us General Dhruv Katoch, who is now a director at the India Foundation, was a former general officer, infantry officer, who has some very strong views about where the Agnipath and the Agniveer scheme needs to be tweaked and how do we need to get the best out of it. And we have a hands-on expert, Lieutenant General Satish Dua, former CISC, and a man who has considerable experience on commanding troops at various operational locations, including 15 Corps in Srinagar, and was the chief at the Integrated Service Headquarters well before the CDS appointment was made, and therefore has an understanding on how South Block was looking at it. So, General Sir, let's have your views about what really was the driving force for the scheme. Was it to cut down on the pension bill? Was it to provide the military a more tech-savvy youth? And is tech-savvy youth the only answer where the vacancies are falling short, particularly in infantry units? And what will be the long-term implications for the army in particular and the other services when such people would be there who may not necessarily want to even give their full commitment during the 4-year period that they are expected to serve?
Addressing the question that you asked, I think it's a bit of everything. That means all the three factors that you mentioned, all of them have a part to play in shaping this scheme, which by now we all know is a radical departure from the past. And that is why it is evoking so much of turbulence in one way or the other. I think the primary motivation started off with having a younger age profile. As you know that our army has an average age profile of 36 years, whereas in the world, most armies have a younger age profile. So with this scheme, after a reasonable number of years, I think it's after about a decade, we will get down to an age profile of 26 years approximately. Then comes the part of being tech-savvy soldiers. Today's warfare has changed. We have seen, let's take contemporary examples, whether it is Armenia, Azerbaijan, or the ongoing war in Russia, Ukraine. Aren't we seeing the kind of precision weaponry that is being used, the drone technologies in play, the missile technology, and how an infantry soldier is having to use the sensor, shooters, everything on his person. So we do need tech-savvy soldiers. And though you started off with it first, the last or the third major contributory factor is the huge and burgeoning pension bill. The pension and salary bill of Indian Army or Armed Forces is 80 to 85% of our defense budget. Now that is something that we can ill afford as a developing country. So to be able to have more in the kitty for modernization. So all these three things put together was what shaped the present scheme called Agnipath and the soldiers that are going to be called Agniveers.
Right. I'll come back to you, sir, with a response to all these points because I want to move on to General Katoch. and want him to give his opening remarks about the scheme and where you felt it can still be changed, because the government is now conveyed through the military that it is open to tweaking it as we go along. And the second aspect is that the scheme itself wasn't something that was imposed after engagement with a lot of stakeholders. Had it been so, then many of the stakeholders like yourself that represents the voice of ex-servicemen would not have had such objection to it. So what are the points of concern at your ends?
Thank you, Maroof. Maroof, this is a subject which I think needs a great deal of deliberation, because what has happened is, there are two words which I would like to use as far as this scheme is concerned. It is transformational, one. It is revolutionary, two. And if you want to have a transformational and a revolutionary scheme, it is bound to be painful. So, I mean, let us get the bottom out of it. It has to be painful. There is no way you can actually tell people that we're going to make it nice and comfortable. Now, was it essential? Yes, in my view, it was essential. But could it have been done in a different way? Perhaps. Now, this is what I want to tell you about a different way. One, I think, the way we project a scheme, I think that projection could have been done in a slightly different manner. As far as the stakeholders are concerned, listen, the stakeholders are only the armed forces. They have discussed it for 2 years. So to say that we should have a larger body of stakeholders, no, not really. They've discussed it. I think the problem was how it was projected outside. And I think what should have been projected was the rationale for the scheme. And in my view, there are two basic rationales. One is, okay, you want to get the age profile down by 2 years or so. That's fine. But listen, we are not a very aged army. Our soldiers retire at 17 years service. So on retirement, the combat soldiers are about 36, 37 years old. And 36, 37, we have tennis players winning world championships. So to that extent, no, I don't think that is the real argument. The real argument is financial, right? And I can understand that there is a financial argument to it and we need to address it. So if this was the problem, then how should it have been addressed? I think those are the concerns. There are three basic points which I have made. One, if you want to look at the financial angle, then don't confine it only to the military. We have got 3,75,000 civilian workforce, which are being paid out of defense estimates. They consume about 30 to 40% of the pension budget. Now, why have we left them out? One. Number two, we have got I think that we need to gel our security forces together. That means the Central Armed Police Forces, the paramilitary and the army. Now, they require trained manpower. If we can give 25% of these Agniveers directly to them, 25%, right? And they are forced to take them. I mean, there should be no ifs and buts. So we can say that 25% of this manpower goes to them, 50% we retain, and 25% are put down into the environment where we assist them in becoming entrepreneurs. You will get a scheme which will be acceptable throughout, right? There will be resistance from the CAPF because there is a resistance to take things like this. But they will get the best of manpower. Absolutely trained, so they've got no training costs. But ultimately, who wins? The nation wins. Now, those are the decisions which I think have not been taken. It has been confined only to the armed forces. So I think it is restrictive.
Okay.
Widen the ambit and we'll get it.
I've got the point. I think there is a need for the military to further hone down their communication process. This is a problem which has existed for decades in terms of the military's messaging that needs to be done perhaps a bit before an announcement, and there was meant to be a meeting with the AG for many in the media. It never happened. Yeah. Then during the announcement and post announcement or post scheme, you have to become more aggressive with your responses to the evolving situation. So there I think there has been a failure in terms of communicating the vision, and the vision is really about the cost cutting which we need to implement. I mean, because I can give all sorts of figures, but I'll come to that. And the other aspect is, it's a very good point you brought out, that 25% needs to be absorbed in the Central Armed Police Forces because A, the military's level of training is higher than any other paramilitary and other organization. So you're getting better trained manpower. Two, there is already an overlap of a lot of responsibilities certain paramilitary forces have with the military, like the BSF and the ITBP are cases in point. So if the guy is to go into that and has 4 years experience in a military unit serving on the front line, he can do a pretty good job on the borders also. So it's a really seamless transition for them. The aspect, General Dua sir, I want you to explain further. You know, there is this whole talk about age profile. And I know there was a time when commanding officers were over 40 years of age, when earlier generation were in 35, 37 years of age. Now we brought it down below 40. But this is not about officers. This is about Jawans. And I've always believed that as you grow older, you translate yourself from a man with a lot of josh with a man with a lot of hosh, as the drill ustad would say. Yeah. So as you become mature as an NCO, you are expected to have that sense of greater responsibility which comes with age and experience. So why are we only looking at a younger armed force when a younger person could be more trigger happy than a more sensible guy, considering the fact, and you have operated in CI ops, where you need to think twice or thrice before pressing the trigger, unlike being on the LOC where fire for fire. So there is that question about younger age group. And the second point that you raised was a tech-savvy soldier. Now, we have seen technology per se doesn't win wars for you. Look at what has happened with the Russian troops in Ukraine. One of the problem areas there was that 25% or so of the frontline units of Russia were made up of conscripts. And conscripts don't dig in and fight. They run at the first shot being fired. So how is this guy going to guarantee you in that 4-year period, he'll put his life on the line?
Maroof, there are two parts to the question you raised. One is about the younger age profile and the second one is about them being tech savvy. Actually, they are very complementary. Because when you lower the age profile and you get actually a healthy mix of Josh and Hosh, because as we said that if 50% are going to be the younger soldiers, I mean eventually after a few years, then the 50% are going to be the seasoned soldiers, which may have come every year incrementally, 25% of these also may have been selected. So it is going to be a judicious and a good mix of Josh and Hosh together to my way of seeing things. On the other hand, when you talk of technological prowesses or capabilities, today technologies are changing so fast that we need younger soldiers. The younger generation is always more tech savvy. When I talk to my retired Jawans, we try to make a WhatsApp group in our retired veterans. A number of them said, "Sab hum WhatsApp nahi karte hain." So they are not that tech savvy. So what I'm trying to say, today technologies are changing so fast. With this faster turnover, recruitment every 4 years, we will be able to have soldiers who will be able to adapt to the technologies better. And the last point on this, as you said, wars are not won by technologies. They are won by the soldiers who operate the technologies. So we want a fresher stock of younger soldiers who can be adaptive, because today it is not the question that it would only be the technical arms and in technological spheres we require tech savvy soldiers. We require tech savvy soldiers in the infantry also and all other arms, because today an infantryman is going to be operating several sensors and several other technological enablers. So I think all in all, this younger age profile and a faster turnover rotation every 4 years is going to stand us in good stead in the changing nature of warfare.
Okay, your point is not entirely contestable. I generally go along with it because, I mean, just like we transited from a 303 rifle to 7.62 to 5.56 and maybe Kalashnikovs now or whatever. Now the point is, transition is a fact of life. Change is a fact of life. But Jen sir, 2 points. He talked about infantry soldiers. The bulk of this lot will go into infantry units. and we all three are infantrymen. And we have seen how the regimental system works. Now, what is the guarantee? And I believe some 46 regimental training institutes and what is we call Cat B, Cat C establishments are short of people to train because for 2 years there has not been any fresh induction. Yes. So this 46,000, my guess is go 1,000 per training outfit. After that, their dissemination into units. You are from the Dogras, which is, Dogra-centric regiment. Now, how will these guys be absorbed if they are put in a all-class composition model when people who come from South India are suddenly asked to be with a Dogra unit where the senior NCO and JCO speaks to them in Dogri and they are used to giving orders like that. They are used to engaging the customs of service, the customs of religion, their basic chutti ka problem and ghar mein kya ho raha hai, all that is linked to their regimental bonding. People outside are not able to comprehend it. I know, General Dua sir, you come from slightly mixed regimental model, Jackli. So do I come from, where there are Jats and Dogras and Kemkhanis. The point is, even that works, I believe, up to a company level. Below that, if you break it down, I have seen problems in certain regiments where they were suddenly made completely mixed. The mechanized infantry, I also served with it. So there is one problem about how do you now channelize this resource into the structure that exists so that you don't upset a wheel that is already running well. And the second question linked with that is that if you are talking of a younger age profile or whatever, this will kick in after 15 years. So in 15 years, the army and a lot of commanding officers have apparently said that they are very unhappy with this idea. So was there any engagement done at the ground level? You said radical reform has to be done. Only it should be done after you've given enough time for tweaking it, deliberating it and running through as case studies. Did we do that?
Now, you see, from the information which I have got, this has been studied for 2 years. Now, what level was it done? I'm not privy to. Now, was it confined barely to the 2-star and 3-star level ranks? Or did they actually get people at the battalion commander level, which is the cutting edge? I'm not aware of it. But I presume the armed forces would have done it right. 2 years is a long time. And in my personal view, I think they would have done it right. They would have taken views. Now, getting down to, there are two, what you talked about, the regimental system. I really don't think there's going to be too much of a problem in that for two reasons. One, they're not going to tinker with the regimental system.
Good.
That is good. That is one. But let us also remember that the regimental system is only confined, basically the largest chunk is the infantry and to a lesser extent the armored corps and the artillery. When we are looking at the engineers, when we are looking at signals, the ordnance units, etc., the whole lot, they are all mixed class.
But the bulk of these guys will go to the infantry?
No. They will go all across.
No, they won't.
Okay.
So that means you will also, the same proportion will go to the engineers, to the ASC, to the ordnance and to the infantry, right? So to that extent, I don't see there's going to be a problem on this issue.
Okay.
The problem is going to come somewhere else. Now, I have carried out a modeling, and this has been validated by people who know modeling. I'm not a modeling expert, but I know that what they have worked out is correct. If you take an infantry battalion, and let us take a service profile of a soldier for 20 years. It is less than that, but for mathematics, let us take a profile of 20 years. You will find that when the scheme matures in 20 years, 60% of the soldiers will be between the 0 to 4 year service bracket. And the balance 40% will be from 4 to 20. Now, that is a very dangerous composition because what is going to happen is in an infantry battalion, we have got our specialist platoons. None of them will take these 0 to 4 years boys, you see, in the logistics, in intelligence, etc. So, all of them are going to be concentrated in the infantry company. And in an infantry company of 120 boys, if you are going to have 80 to 90% of these fellows in the 0 to 4 year service bracket, I think we are going to have a very serious operational problem.
Okay.
But this can be rectified very simply by two simple aspects. One, increase the service profile to 6 years. That is the first one. That means this Agniveer scheme to 6 years. And the second one is take in 50% as regulars. Now, if you just do this, you get 30% in the 0 to 4 year service bracket, which gives the age profile which the General Dua is talking about, and you will get about, say, 65 to 70% between 4 to 20 years. Now, that will give you the correct payoffs. It will save you huge pensionary bills, at least to the tune of 50% when it comes about. And when we start putting in these boys, if a quarter of them into these CAPFs, as I had mentioned earlier, what will happen is that the resistance from the environment will dissipate completely, because now 75% of the crowd has been catered for, and 25%, I can assure you, will make excellent entrepreneurs. They will be the people who will give jobs.
Yes,
it will work. It will work very well, and it can be win-win. So I think we need to go. We need to at least examine that. We need to at least examine that.
Oh, that's a very good idea. I'll just come to you briefly after General Dua's response, because we're a bit tight on time, but we will. General sir, 2 quick points. One is, they say that this scheme in the long run will really reap benefits after 15 years. 2, it says that the scheme will give us overall a cutting on pension expenses by 34,500 crores, plus minus. And therefore, this has financial benefits, but it's not going to come in overnight. Now, some have argued that you increase the defense budget outlay to 3% of GDP. Now, I don't know if the government can afford that, because the government's counter argument is, as the GDP goes up, and the GDP apparently has gone up 100% from 2011 to 2021. So therefore, if the GDP has gone up, so has defense expenditure allocation gone up. Last, I believe, was 9.8% higher than the previous year. So those figures, we can keep going around it. The bottom line is that, are we going to be looking at a different armed force, not just in terms of age and technology, but in terms of the motivation levels that is there in the existing armed force? The counter argument could be, the less pada likha the guy is, the more easy it is for the senior NCO to mold him. So how do you get the best out of people who are too educated, too intelligent, and too questioning?
Look, as far as education levels are concerned, Maroof, the education levels are roughly the same, because we are still looking at a 10th pass soldier, as I'm talking of the army, and that remains unchanged with Agniveer scheme.
So how is he tech savvy?
He is tech savvy as the new generation today. If a boy...
That any Jawan would have been, why call him Agniveer tech savvy?
Alright. So, because if one who's enrolled today, if he's going to stay for 17 years, then by his middle years of service, he does not remain up to date with the latest technologies. So today, a boy who works in any lowly job, also a boy who comes from the village, also who takes up any employment in a city, he knows how to play online games. I don't know how to play online games on my mobile as yet. So the point is, these boys or women later will find it easy to adapt to the newer technologies. But let me take the more important question that you raised, is about the Josh. Will they be able to perform better? I mean, you feel that these soldiers may not be able to perform better as a cutting edge in combat. Let me give you an example of Kargil, or what's happening mostly in Kashmir. All those, the fallen heroes who led us to victories in both these places, because these are fresh in our minds, all were below 25. Dil Mange Morwala, Captain Vikram Batra, or so many other names I can take. But the point is, they also soldiers, not only officers, they are all less than 25. An officer who was commissioned at 21 and is less than 24, 25 years of age, you know that he's served only for 2 to 3 years. Similar is the case, I can tell you with my experience, and it's available in empirical data, is in Kashmir. You have younger age profile. If they've served for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they have absorbed that ethos very well. It is not, so what I'm trying to say, just because he's served only for 4 years and he may not absorb the ethos, may be incorrect to say, because our infantry units or all units will be able to give them that Jazba, Josh, Janoon, which we reserve for any soldier.
Okay, point well seen, sir. And I hope it works well. It has worked in the past, and let's hope we can continue to keep that up, because like everything else, the ethos also changes. But General Katoch, quick point. One is the mindset that the military creates. You're talking about people going out into CV Street. This scheme offers a lot, I believe, to somebody who steps out. 12 lakhs, maybe as you said on another TV program, up to 18 lakhs in hand once they leave this service, which you can put into higher education or business or whatever. Two, it gives you a mindset which is only unique to the military, and it creates that. And in Israel, I know a lot of success stories with startups have happened because people have had military exposure, whether willingly or otherwise. That's a separate issue. So your take about how these guys can be absorbed, this whole ruckus that's on the streets about sarkari job, is the military a job? I believe it's more than a job. So therefore, we don't want vandals in the service.
Maroof, I'm absolutely clear. Anybody protesting, there is no way in which they will be taken into the military. They are unfit and they are a scourge, I will use that word, on society. And people who are supporting them, likewise so. So that is one, we will not take them. But the more important point is, you see, it gives an individual an opportunity. How long does it take for a chap to get 20 lakhs? It's so difficult to get that money.
I know.
Here he has got this 20, maybe 22 lakhs within a period of 4 years. He's given his service, and now he can walk around with pride to say, listen, I have done something for my country. Now I'll make a life of my own. Now we have to actually mold him into that level. But it cannot be done for 75% of this force, which is why I earlier made my statement. Keep 50%. Put 25% into the Central Armed Police Forces, and that must be mandatory. It cannot be put otherwise. They will go. We start from there. And the 25% we can handle. There's one last point which I want to give. You see, in this scheme, we are not addressed the civilian force within the defense establishment. Please address that. There are 3,75,000 personnel. We need to sort that out. That is the tail. It is not, the tail is not your logistic support like ALC and ordnance. The military tail is the 375,000 civilians working there, including in the Ministry of Defense.
I know. And they are only an impediment, if you ask me, than facilitators, at least in South Block. I have my very strong views about that. But more of that perhaps on another show. But it's very clear that Desh Seva or national service is not just the privilege and prerogative of men in uniform. You can be a good citizen outside a uniformed service. So people should not be encouraged or should not take the law into their hand to convey a point कि फौज की ही नौकरी चाहिए. बहुत सी और नौकरियां हैं where you can make a contribution. But thank you very much, sir, for your wisdom. And thanks for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.